What's up, everybody? Episode 2, this old hot rod. I'm kind of trying to build a working man's hot rod, something that you can build in your backyard or your, backyard shop. Not for a lot of money, but more ingenuity than anything, using readily available, essentially inexpensive parts. Minus obviously the motor, the transmission. No matter what you do, unless you get someone give them to you, no matter what you do, you're going to spend a couple of bucks. So. But I want to show you guys what I got done the other day, Christmas Eve, actually. I had a little bit of time, so I ran out to the shop, fired up the heater, and got some things done. I showed you guys I went to the steel company. I bought some box tube, and I did a quick layout of the floor on top of the frame rails. And I'll show you guys what I got done. All right, so this is what I got done. A little bit of a mess under the car, or the chassis. I ended up removing, remember I had said in the first video, episode 1, I removed these brackets. So you get the body mount bracket. Not really sure what that would have held. But these brackets here, and I think that might be a hood shelf, I'm not sure. I like to reuse things like this because it's a bracket. It's a 90-degree bracket with holes in it already. So to me, this stuff is gold. This saves a lot of time having to build something like that. And I want to show you 4 examples of that. First 2 examples, depending on how you lay out your chassis for your floor structure, rather, not your chassis, your floor structure. If you were to take these 2 large mounts that are here, triangles, if you punch out the rivets, this is one of those mounts. I punch out the rivet, use the bottom hole. I have to open it up a little bit to get a 3/8 bolt through. So you nut and bolt it through on the rear cross member. You notch this section out right here, the top portion of the frame rail. You bolt it in there. You do the same thing on the passenger side. Drill out the hole because it's just set up for a rivet. You drill out the hole. You drill out the hole in the cross member. 3/8 bolt, nut and bolt it through. Notch this section out here. I cut this down. You can see that these are where the actual bolts would have gone through for the floor structure originally for the body mounts. Cut it off the same height as this. Weld it on. You bolt it in first, and then what you do is you run your floor structure down and you butt it right up to the edge of that. So you know the body's going to fit over that. These holes that go through here, it lines up perfectly. They're already in the cross member. Kind of a cheat, you know? I'll show you, see if I can get the nut off of here. They're just finger tight. So those holes in the cross member are already there. And this is all just tacked in place. You just drill that out a little bit, throw a bolt in it, nut it, and you do that first. Then once you start laying out your floor structure, you just lay it right up against it. Again, you can see where the bolts would have gone through to mount the body on the chassis originally. Leave that there. And then you build your floor structure off of that. So, and then on the other mounts, you have these mounts here. I use those here. So you have 2 rivets. I believe these are for the brake rods. The hole's already in it. Bolt it in, cut it off level with the top of the floor structure. Just run a weld on it. I'll weld up the sides and weld up the bottom too. So I have, at this point now, I have these 2 mounts here, 2 on the far back. You can always add some in the middle if you want. And then I'm going to add 2 at the cowl. I run these pieces of steel a little bit longer. Cut them off here, leave them long, because I know at some point I'm going to end up having to cut them off. There's 2 mounting holes. There's one here. See that? And there's one here. So for this particular body, I already brought it up and set it on top of the chassis. But I measured from these holes here, the splash apron bolts, to the front of here. I did equal measurements from the frame to this spot, to these holes, and then just on the back side of the hole, you can see it, I welded these stops. So at this point now, when I set the body on the car, set the body on the chassis or the floor structure, the cowl feet are going to hit these. So I know it's square across the front of the car. And then when I get time to channel it, I'll end up channeling, and the firewall is going to slide right down the front of these. I just don't want the body sliding forwards because it's on a chain fall and it seems to want to kind of travel around. There's a kink in the frame here, which is factory. I just did one slice with a cutoff, and it pinched it just enough to follow the contour of the frame. It has kind of a V or a pinch. You can see it right here where it kind of goes and then it kicks out. I did the same on the other side. I clamped these down. I had a clamp here, a clamp here so it wouldn't move when I welded it, and then a clamp here. At that point, I clamped both of them down on both sides. I just zapped it real quick with the welder, threw a couple tacks on it. I threw the first brace across here, right in front of the transmission cross member. The reason why you can't go on top of the cross member is because there's a bump. The top of the cross member is actually higher than the top of the chassis. Remember, on these cars, most times, all the time, as factory, they had wood in them. So this really wasn't an issue. But because I'm building a hot rod, the top of the cross member is actually taller. And try to get a shot. You can see that, right? So this surface here is actually taller than this surface here. So in order for me to run this piece of metal across the top of my transmission cross member, I would either have to notch it or I would have to raise this metal up about 1/8 of an inch. So I just decided to move it in front of it. That gave me a spot, like I said, to bolt down. Do some body mounts, a couple extra body mounts. This frame structure is just tacked together, but it's on there pretty good. I measured 18 inches back and then 17 inches back. Why I measured those and went that route? With the metal that I had left over, I had enough metal to create a piece of stock here, and then I took the second half and went here, and then I did a piece of stock here and took the second half and went behind the rear cross member. It's just because I wanted to use up the 8-foot lengths and not waste any. At that point, what I did was I got these 3 cross members done. Then I measured for my kick up. You can see everything's just kind of tacked in place, kind of blew out the metal a little bit. I had the welder a little too hot there. But I just wanted to follow the contour of the frame. Again, I probably could have done it a little bit different, but I'm just trying to do this quick. I'm gonna probably trim that down just a little bit. You can see where I trimmed it a little tall. I'm gonna cut that down and then weld that, so that floor mount or body mount would be good. This was a failed attempt at the step here. I measured it wrong. I'm actually gonna end up probably scabbing in a piece of metal here and filling this in or cutting this off and adding a piece, because the back of the body actually comes back to about here and it kind of swoops around. So all this will have a structure here. The gas tank's gonna go there behind the rear cross member. In the future, if someone wants to put in a back seat, they'll be able to, should be able to. I did not film this, like I said. I was out here for a little over an hour, Christmas Eve. I was in the process of editing videos and my SD card was in my camera. It was on the computer. I just didn't do any videos, so it was kind of like, get out here and do it quick. But from here moving forward, you can see the floor structure. If you guys have any questions, reach out to me. This is super simple. I overhung it by 1/8 of an inch. 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch in some spots. Over here it's 1/8 of an inch because on the frame it's got a little bit of a swoop out. What I need to do is I need this out far enough so I can run some sheet metal down the side of the frame. I'll run it down probably 6-8 inches down. I'm going to cut some in my jump shear So it'll look like a skirt going down the frame. And what's going to happen is when I lower the body down over, I'm going to use that sheet metal to tie everything in. But I'm not going to do that quite yet. That'll be in a little bit. What I want to do is I want to get the body lifted up, moved onto the chassis. I want to lower it down, make some marks, cut the floor structure out, and then lower the car down. Once it's lowered down over the chassis and it's sitting where I want, at that point, I'll probably end up having to do a lot of bracing and support because there's not a lot of floor structure in this car and the sheet metal is real flimsy. The reason why there's going to be a lot of support is there's not a lot of structure in the back of this car. Sorry, there's kind of a lot of stuff in the way here, but it's going to take me a little bit of time to get everything squared and level and sitting level. So it's gonna take some ingenuity, probably a bunch of straps and things on my chain fall. I took a hammer and dolly this out after work today, so it actually kind of looks pretty good. Not too bad, still a little low, but the metal was a couple spots where the metal was starting to tear. You can see that there's a pretty bad crease right here. So that's it. That's what I got done. There will be more structure here where my foot pans are going to be, but then I'm going to have my pedal assembly here. From getting the chassis in, finishing the Z, welding that all up, building the floor structure, and getting the mounts done, I'm probably between 3 to 4 hours. So we'll say 3.5 hours worth of work so far. Doesn't take long. So next will be, like I said, channeling the car and getting the body set over the chassis. I got the body rigged up on the chain fall, on the hoist. I've already picked it up. It's pretty level for the most part. The nose sits a little low. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hoist it up and I'm going to get it rolled over on top of the chassis. Then I'm going to lower it down on the chassis and I'm going to get the camera and show you guys where I'm going to make my cuts in order to get the body down over the chassis. I only have a couple hours today. I worked this morning. I had to take some time off of work today. I have a dentist appointment. I got to get a tooth pulled. Yeah, that's about it. So I've got like probably a little over an hour that I can spend in the shop before I get my tooth pulled, and then we'll see how I'm feeling later on when I get home. I'm not exactly sure. It's been a while since I've had anything like that done.
Of nature and learn to love before I die. I was naked then, I'm naked now, and my nakedness is my sole account. I'm unfaithfulness, I'm a fucking clown, but I tried my best.
All right, so the first thing I'm noticing is where the frame kicks up. It's hitting the sub rail here and over there, right where my finger is. You can see where the kick up comes up. So I'm going to remove this one. This is already loose, so I'm going to remove this cross member. I'm going to cut the sub rail about the front of that cross member there. It's actually kicked forwards here. It's supposed to be back a couple inches here. I'm gonna cut the metal here and the same spot on the other side, and then I'm gonna let it sit down just a little bit more in the back. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go around and I'm basically gonna mark right where my floor structure is, the new framework going down the top of the frame rail. You can see it there. And on the other side, and then I'm just gonna take my cutoff wheel and just go straight down and follow those lines. And at that point, the body should go down over the chassis. Also, what I need to do is I need to slice up the front of the firewall about to here. This will all get removed in the future when it comes time to put a motor in the car. I don't know that I'm gonna do it. If I do, it'll probably be a flathead. And the flathead I'll put in it will probably just be for mock-up because I'll keep it. I won't sell the car with it. So I'll have to cut up here and then cut across. And then at that point, the body should come down. I do have to remove the cowl feet You can see here, these are the cowl feet. These are bad. And then what I'll end up using is these mounts. These mounts, excuse me. These mounts used to go here on the side of the frame. I'll end up trimming these down and using these mounts. This piece of steel will be gone, so it'll be down on top of the frame. We'll end up using these mounts, something like that. So it's good to hang on to these things. Like I said, to me, this stuff is gold. It's a 90-degree bend with holes on both sides. But you can use it for anything. I'm gonna get my chalk pen out and start making some marks. I'm gonna get some measurements first, make sure the body's sitting where it needs to be on the chassis. And then once I get it positioned where it needs to be, I'll just get my big cutoff wheel and just start cutting this floor out. All right, I think that's about as good of a spot as I'm gonna get. So for now, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get in there and just, like I said, get a chalk pen or something like that. Sorry I have the heat going. I can't shut it off every time I go to talk, but I'll try to talk loud so I can, you know, drown it out a little bit. Hey, come in, come in. It's like one of them escape rooms. This is what I did on my last car. Except when it gets to here, I'm gonna cut it right off at the front of the wheel well. Cut that right down. Not a lot of meat on the bone, let's tell you that. Not a lot of meat on the bone. So what I'm gonna do is right at the back of the cowl, where the sub rail meets the cowl foot, I'm gonna end it right there in case I end up replacing this cowl with the other cowl that I have, because it is nicer. Not much nicer, but it is nicer. We'll go check that out in a little bit and show you guys. I had to change out my battery pack, so what I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna cut around the outside edges on the sub rail, and then I'm gonna end my cuts right at the cowl feet. This is Wesley. He's my bulldog. Not Bud. He's 10. He'll be 11 this year. He's hanging out with me in the shop this morning. I'm gonna bring him up to the house real quick, and then I'll be right back and get to cutting. Okay? We'll go up to the house. All right. Trying to get settled in here and then get to cutting. Move this strap first. Actually, you know what? I'll leave it. Watch the paint! Don't scratch the paint! Alright, now I'm gonna just follow down the outside edge. There's just nothing here. Woo! Gross!
And my nakedness is my sole account. I'm unfaithfulness. I'm a fucking clown. But I tried my best. Yes, I tried.
place the cowl. The bottom of the cowl foot, where the side of the cowl attaches to. Why this is flopping, there's just no structure there. A lot more pieces fell off of the car than I had planned. Not because I cut things wrong, but because there's just so much rot on the bottom of this car. I have another cowl. I am most likely going to end up using some of that cowl. Probably not the whole thing, because it was cut off at the bottom of the windshield. Probably used for like a doodlebug type of situation. I think I took 6 inches off. I may have taken 8 inches off, but I like where it's sitting at this point. You know, obviously there's no wheels and tires, there's no suspension under the car, so it's hard to tell exactly where it's going to sit at ride height and all that stuff. But I mean, in a perfect world, if it sat where it's at, ride height, that would be pretty cool. If I had a 750 rear on the back, which I won't, I'm going to throw a pair of 15s, a full set of 15-inch wheels and tires that I have. The 750 tire would probably be somewhere in this range, which is pretty much perfect. I think there's still going to be plenty of headroom. You know, the floors are going to be flat. I'm going to end up having to rebuild the structure where the sill plate is, because the rocker fell off on the driver's side and it's just barely holding on the passenger side. See it here, that's the rocker panel, that's the sill. That's what you see when you open the door. So that's moved, that fell off on the driver's side. So I'll end up having to maybe kind of rebuild something. I want to make the car obviously structurally sound. I don't want to build a piece of shit and then try to just sell it to someone. I mean, anyone can go online and watch this video and see what I did, and they're gonna know whether or not I built a halfway decent car or not. So I want to make it so it's structurally sound and it's a good foundation for the next guy to take it and go with it. You know, that's kind of where I'm at. But I like the height of the body. I think the channel looks good. It's going to take some time to build the structure. So I'm going to show you what I mean by that. So the area in question that's going to take some time is the space in between this structure here and the bottom of the body. But again, I think the way it's sitting, I think it looks pretty good. But I want to do this pretty quick, you know.